Meeting to order. Supervisor Lofton, would you lead us in an invocation?
Let us pray. Our Heavenly Father, we thank you for this beautiful, albeit windy day in this beautiful community that we call home of Frederick County. We thank you for the many blessings you have bestowed upon our people, and we trust that you will continue to bless us with your goodwill. We do think about all the people in the world who are suffering today, from the people in Washington, from the mudslide to the tragic ferry accident in Japan. And we ask that you be with all those who are suffering. Be with our armed forces, those who serve us and protect us, that we enjoy the freedoms that we do. And we ask that you look over them and keep them safe as well. Our Heavenly Father, we thank you. We accept your guidance tonight for those members on the board, that we may do your bidding and do what is best for citizens of Frederick County. And we ask all this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Vice Chairman DeHaven, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Stand and face the flag for the pledge, please. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Adoption of the agenda, Mr. Riley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have one addition as number 4 under county officials, to add a proclamation honoring the Smith-Lever Act for its 100th anniversary and the creation of the Extension Service.
Is that it?
Yes, sir.
All right, is there a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
So moved.
Motion by Supervisor Wells, is there a second?
Second, Mr. Chairman.
Second by Supervisor Hess. Discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The agenda is adopted. Consent agenda, Mr. Riley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd offer the following tabs. Tab D, setting the summer schedule and November and December meeting schedule. Tab E, Parks and Recreation Commission report. Tab F, Human Resources Committee report. And number 4, proclamation reference the Smith-Lever Act.
Questions? If not, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Motion by Supervisor DeHaven, second.
Second, Mr. Chairman.
Second by Supervisor Fisher. Discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The consent agenda is approved. Citizen comments. Mr. Riley, did anyone sign up?
No, sir, Mr. Chairman.
Are there any Board of Supervisors comments? Hearing none, we'll move on to the minutes of the regular meeting, April 9th, 2014.
Chairman,
For approval as submitted, Mr.
A
Chairman.
motion by Supervisor Lofton and second by Supervisor DeHaven. Discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The minutes of the regular meeting, April 9th, 2014 are approved. Next is a presentation. Vice Chairman DeHaven, if you would join me, and I'd ask Deborah A. Hamilton to come forward. The Employee of the Month Award Program recognizes county's employees as an important and valuable resource. On behalf of the Board of Supervisors, it is my pleasure to present Deborah A. Hamilton for consideration as Employee of the Month for April 2014. Deborah serves the Northwestern Regional Adult Detention Center and is an officer that can effectively work any post assignment in a productive and exceptional manner. She is being awarded Employee of the Month for April for displaying great teamwork and loyalty to the facility when and wherever she is needed. Her selfless performance during challenging times not only aids in the team's ability to operate in a smooth, safe, and secure manner, but also attests to her professionalism and personal integrity. Now I entertain a motion to approve Deborah A. Hamilton as Employee of the Month for April 2014.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
A motion by Supervisor Hess, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Supervisor Lofton. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Deborah A. Hamilton is hereby recognized as the Frederick County Employee of the Month for April 2014. The Board of Supervisors extends its gratitude to you for your outstanding performance and dedicated services and wishes you continued success in future endeavors. Thank you so much. Next are the committee appointments. Sanitation Authority, I have a nominee before you. Attached application.
Mr. Chairman, I move for approval.
We have a motion by Supervisor DeHaven to approve. Is there a second?
Second, Mr. Chairman.
Second by Supervisor Fisher. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Then I guess I should have announced George Michael Cundiff is hereby appointed to the Frederick County Sanitation Authority. Next is the Agricultural District Advisory Committee. It looks like we have 2 slots, but 1 possible candidate. Am I reading that correctly?
That's correct. Well, we have 3 resignations, 1 person who's interested in serving on the board.
So we have 3 slots, 1 person to fill 1 of the 3.
Yes, sir.
Okay. What is your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman, I would recommend Mr. Cordell Watt be nominated to serve on the Agricultural District Advisory Committee.
All right, we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second, Mr. Chairman.
Supervisor DeHaven. Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Mr. Cordell Watt is hereby appointed to the Agricultural District Advisory Committee. And are we looking, or are we getting help with the other 2?
We're looking.
We're looking. So nominees from anywhere are welcome.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Next is the Historic Resources Advisory Board, Redbud. Are we ready?
No, sir.
Parks and Recreation Commission, Redbud.
No, sir.
Historic Resources Advisory Board, Shawnee, excuse me. All
Not ready yet, Mr. Chairman.
right. Next is a report on the Business Friendly Committee. Mr. Riley, is that you?
Yes, sir. Staff is providing the board with an update on the status of the recommendations derived from the Business Friendly Committee. Some of these recommendations remain a work in progress, while others are ready for board action. Review and evaluation of the master development plan process. The board referred the reevaluation of the current master development plan process to the Planning Commission and the Development Review and Regulations Committee. The DRRC reviewed the requirements and did not believe the MDP requirement should be eliminated. It was felt this was an important process for both the applicant and the public. The DRRC recommended that the MDP ordinance be modified to allow for a waiver of the MDP requirement if an applicant chooses to process a detailed site plan in lieu of the MDP. The Planning Commission considered this item at their April 2nd, 2014 meeting and concurred with the DRRC's recommendation. This will be an agenda item on this agenda. Planning staff will be seeking direction from the board regarding whether to send the proposed amendment forward to public hearing. Establishment of an Economic Development Authority. At the January 8th, 2014 board meeting, the board approved an ordinance changing the name from the Industrial Development Authority of the county to the Economic Development Authority of Frederick County. In addition, the board sought special legislation to allow the board to appoint a member of the Board of Supervisors as a voting member to the EDA. This legislation has been approved by the General Assembly and signed by the governor. The new legislation will be effective July 1, 2014. The board voted on the proposed makeup of the newly named EDA board, which would consist of 3 members each from the existing Economic Development Commission and the Economic Development Authority, and 1 member of the Board of Supervisors. Since that time, the EDA members have held discussions and unanimously agreed the Board of Supervisors needed the flexibility to consider all available and interested talent within Frederick County when appointing the new members to the Economic Development Authority, and should not be restricted to 3 members each from the current EDC and EDA. Based on the EDA's members' position, the board should give serious consideration to opening up the pool for EDA membership. As you might recall, the board reappointed Mrs. Beverly B. Shoemaker to the EDA until July 1, 2014. The executive director of the Economic Development Commission will attend the next EDA meeting to brief the authority on the upcoming transition to include staffing, working group functionality, and funding after July 1, 2014. Reduction in proffer requirements. The Development Impact Model Oversight Committee conducted a reevaluation of the current development impact model, taking into account current economic conditions. The committee discussed the possibility of offering credits for proffered transportation improvements above those typically expected to address transportation impacts. The Development Impact Oversight Committee recommended approval of a policy modification to enable credit for transportation. The board affirmed the change to the development impact model to allow transportation credits for rezoning. The DMOC continued to reevaluate the model to see if further modifications would be appropriate. Those additional areas of study include tax contributions that may result from new industrial residential development and tax contributions that may result from new commercial development associated with a residential development proposal. In addition, the committee reviewed the model to see if there were any components that prohibited growth. The committee recommended no further changes to the DMOC. Simplification of the landscape ordinance. The board referred the reevaluation of the current buffers and landscaping ordinance to the Planning Commission and the DRRC. The DRRC reviewed the suggested changes from the Business-Friendly Committee. The DRRC recognized that the buffer and landscaping sections were recently reviewed and felt the existing ordinance was appropriate. The DRRC recommended that the parking lot landscaping requirements be incorporated into the main landscaping session. The Planning Commission considered this item at their April 2nd meeting. After some discussion and hearing comments from members of the public, the Commission referred the item back to the DRRC for further review and consideration. Signage along major routes entering Frederick County. The board referred this recommendation to the Transportation Committee and the Economic Development Commission for review of signage placement, messaging, respectively. The EDC shared their preliminary recommendations, and the EDA, since the EDA was the EDC shared their preliminary recommendations with the Economic Development Authority, since the Economic Development Authority will ultimately fund this initiative. The EDA discussed this item at their February 20th, 2014 and March 20th, 2014 meetings. A signage subcommittee was established to select a design and craft the messaging. The subcommittee continues to work with the EDC Executive Director and the Executive Director of the Winchester Frederick County Convention and Visitors Bureau regarding messaging and branding. At the EDA's March 20th meeting, the EDA referred this item to the Transportation Committee for input regarding placement and how best to work with VDOT on this initiative. Once the EDA has finalized their recommendation, it will be forwarded to the Board of Supervisors for endorsement, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Riley, perhaps bullet by bullet, you would lay out for us what you think the next step is. Sometimes it's abundantly clear we're waiting on a recommendation, and sometimes it's a little unclear as to what the next step might be. So you could just outline that bullet by bullet.
The review and evaluation of the master development plan, that will be at the end of your agenda tonight to send to public hearing. And that is basically saying if a detailed site plan is required, the master development plan requirement can be waived. The Economic Development Authority and the establishment thereof, the biggest item, takeaway from that is the EDA thought that it was important for the board to keep all of its options open on how it appoints the members to the EDA and not to restrict itself to 3 members from the EDC and 3 members from the EDA.
I know you and I had some discussion on this, and you had some preliminary thoughts. It's, that probably I don't know what you'll say, but are you willing to share those at this time about what the next step is?
Well, I think it would be incumbent for the board members to communicate with the chairman as to any prospective candidates they may feel are out there that are worthy of consideration to be appointed to the EDA.
Any other board dialogue on that subject? I think it sounds like the ball's in our court. Comfortable? with that? Continue, Mr. Riley.
Proper requirements, basically, the DMOC, or I won't lay out that full committee name, but the DMOC agreed with the board as far as the transportation credits or impacts and being able to reduce the proper impact with reference to that particular item. They felt the proffer model in and of itself was adequate, but they will revisit the model as to how tax contributions might affect the model in a positive way that would give a developer some reduction in the proper requirements of the developer with reference to the fiscal impact.
So will we basically wait until all the items are looked at in
Yes,
your
sir.
mind?
On that one.
Okay.
And then the landscape ordinance didn't pass muster with the planning commission, and it's gone back to the DRRC. And then finally, the signage issue, which is a significant issue for us as far as messaging and branding. The physical placement of the signs, we are sending to the Transportation Committee to work with VDOT on how and where they'll be placed. We understand you can't put a sign in the middle of Interstate 81, that's obvious. But we're more interested in looking at the entranceways into the county on the major arterials such as Route 11, Route 57, and so forth. And then finally, a subcommittee of the EDA is working on messaging and branding, but all of those particular items will be back before this board before any final decisions are made as to how that moves forward, because we realize that's a significant issue.
So it sounds like just one item is before us for conclusion.
Right.
Anybody have questions?
I apologize for the lengthy report.
I think it's good. All right, if there are no questions, then we'll move forward to a public hearing on an outdoor festival permit request of Mr. Alea White and Ms. Omar Teagle.
It's been withdrawn, Mr. Chairman.
I'm sorry, I didn't correct. Then we'll move on to another outdoor festival permit request of Mr. DeMarchi, and I apologize if I said that wrong, Spears, for College Spring Formal Dance, Christensen College. Mr. Riley?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a festival permit requested by DeMarchi Spears with Christensen College for the College Spring Formal Dance. And this is pursuant to the Frederick County Code, Chapter 86 Festivals, Section 86-3, where a permit is required and an application is required to be issued with reference to the outdoor festival permit. This festival will be held on Saturday, May 3rd, 2014, from 8 p.m. to 1:30 a.m. on the grounds of Trumpet Vine Farm, 266 Valcluse Road, Stevens City, Virginia. The property is owned by DeMarchi Spears.
Questions of Mr. Riley? Is there an applicant who wishes to speak?
I'm the applicant, I'm DeMarchi.
Would you like to speak? Okay. All right, now we'll conduct a public hearing to consider an outdoor festival permit request of Mr. DeMarchi Spears, College Spring Formal Dance, Christensen College, pursuant to the Frederick County Code, Chapter 86 Festivals, Section 86-3, issuance or denial for an outdoor festival permit. Festival will be held on Saturday, May the 3rd, 2014, from 8 o'clock p.m. to 1:30 a.m. on the grounds of Trumpet Vine Farm, 266 Valcluse Road, Stevens City, Virginia, property owned by DeMarco Spears. Is there anyone here who would like to speak either for or against this outdoor festival permit? Seeing no one, we'll close the public hearing. Is this Back Creek?
Yes, sir, it is. Mr. Chairman, there were several items that the applicant had to clarify and expand upon. And as I understand it, the county attorney has assured me that all those items have been taken care of. And hearing no opposition, I would move to approve the application for the outdoor festival permit of Mr. DeMarchi Spears.
We have a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second, Mr. Chairman.
Second by Supervisor Hess. Discussion. Hearing none. Supervisor Hess.
Aye.
Supervisor Collins.
Aye.
Supervisor Fisher.
Aye.
Supervisor DeHaven.
Aye.
Supervisor Lofton.
Aye.
Supervisor Wells.
Aye.
Chairman votes aye and the motion passes. Next is another public hearing on a conditional use permit 02-14 for Jessica N. Neff for a kennel. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. This is a request for a kennel for dog boarding. The property is located at 461 Lord Grove Road, is in the Back Creek Magisterial District. The property is currently zoned RA rural areas. The adjoining properties are also zoned RA rural areas. Their land use is residential, vacant, in the VPI Agricultural Research Center. If I could turn your attention to the map on your left, the property is outlined, or excuse me, on your left, to the outlined property is where the application for this conditional use permit will be conducted. Kennels are permitted in the RA zoning district with approved conditional use permit. This proposed use will be taking place on a 7-acre parcel surrounded by properties that are also zoned RA, with the nearest property being joining this proposed use being greater than 600 feet. The applicant has provided an aerial photograph of where the kennel is going to be located, which is in the rear of the property of the main structure. The applicant will be constructing a 20 by 30 square foot enclosed kennel with a fenced area for exercising the dogs. The 2030 Comprehensive Policy Plan of Frederick County has this area of the county being rural in nature, and also there is no land use study currently happening in that area of the county. The Planning Commission on its April 2nd meeting did review this conditional use permit. There were two citizens that spoke against this proposed conditional use permit for a kennel. However, the Planning Commission did forward it to the Board of Supervisors with the following attached conditions to the conditional use permit. Condition number 1, all review agencies and comments requirements should be complied with at all times. Number 2, no more than 28 dogs shall be permitted on the property at a given time. Number 3, the CUP is solely to enable boarding of dogs on the property. Number 4, no employees other than those residing on the property should be allowed. Number 5, all dogs should be controlled as not to create a nuisance to any adjoining properties by roaming, free, or barking. Number 6, all dogs must be confined indoors by 9 p.m. and not to be let outdoors prior to 8 a.m. Number 7, any proposed business sign should conform to cottage occupation sign requirements, is that the sign should not exceed 4 square feet in size and 5 feet in height. And number 8, any expansion or modification of this conditional use permit will require an approval of a new conditional use permit. The applicant, Ms. Neff, is here to answer any questions the board may have on this proposed conditional use permit for a dog kennel for boarding. Staff, of course, will answer any questions that the board may have, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Any questions for staff?
Yes.
Supervisor Hess.
The number of dogs in the summary you have there, 28, was that suggested by the applicant, or was that something, or was that in the original application, or is that something you arrived at, a number that you arrived at in discussions with the applicant?
That was a number arrived at discussing with the applicant at her behest.
Supervisor Fisher?
Mr. Chairman, I noticed the comments were made about the acoustical construction techniques, and I don't believe in looking at this. Do we have any way of evaluating specifications or anything? We don't have anything in the county that would allow that to be evaluated, do we?
We don't particularly, because it comes through a building permit. However, we can add it as a condition. But again, Mr. Fisher, we'd have to look at everything and talk with have an engineered seal on it, and then, of course, going through the permit process. But obviously, we could add a condition. The applicant, as put out in the staff report, did say that the dogs would be mostly kept indoors. But again, that's a hard, I would say that would be pretty hard.
Other questions for staff? Thank you. Would the applicant like to come forward and speak and answer questions?
Good evening. I am Jessica Neff. I'm proposing the dog kennels. I I want to specify more on the building, the noise concerns, the waste concerns of that nature. The studs of the building are going to be wider than normal. Usually they're 2x4, they're going to be 2x6 to provide 2 extra inches of the insulation. There is going to be 2 feet concrete off of the floor, one to provide taller walls for the concrete to provide more insulation where the dogs are going to be at the lower level, but also cleaning. With that 6 foot of 5/8 inch sheetrock, which will be on top of that insulation, along with the wrap on the outside between the siding and the inside of the wall. There will be double insulated, blown-in insulation in the attic of the building, between the roof and, of course, the building itself. The kennels will use 72-inch tall RFP board with stainless steel doors for noise dampening. This allows the noise to be reflected up instead of out. The dogs will be maintained inside during the day. They will go out 4 to 5 times per day, and not every dog will go out at one time. Not all dogs get along with every other dog, certain instances like that. Every time they are outside, it will be supervised. They will not be outside unsupervised. I have contacted, Judy Calls is the name. It's a waste management company. They can come from twice a week to bi-weekly, depending on the amount of dogs on the property at the time. They will clean the yard. They will provide a canister on the yard for me to scoop whatever is remaining in between cleanings, and also any inside cleaning that I do during that time can go into that canister, and all waste is removed from the property. There will be pick-up and drop-off by appointment only to avoid congestion. And the maximum is 28 dogs. That's 14 families with 2 dogs a family. That's maximum, not probably going to happen very often.
Questions for the applicant?
Yes, I've got a series of questions. How long have you lived on the property?
10 years.
And before submitting your application, did you notify or talk with your neighbors?
I did it the following Monday. I sent out a letter.
Okay. The other thing, I don't know whether you had a formal business plan or not, but if you did you have any number of dogs that it would take to make the business successful?
I have calculated that out, yes. At least 10.
Okay, so it's something less than 28?
It is.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll now conduct a public hearing on a conditional use permit 02-14 for Jessica M. Neff for kennel. Property is located at 461 Laurel Grove Road and is identified with property identification number 73-9-3 in the Back Creek Magisterial District. Is there anyone here who would like to speak either for or against this conditional use permit? If so, please come forward, give your name, magisterial district, and limit your comments to 3 minutes, please. Is there anyone?
Good evening. My name is Ed Coleman. I'm counsel for Mr. and Mrs. Berman. They live just down the road from this property in the same magisterial district. And the Bermans submitted or attempted to submit to the board, and I'd like to hand out, if I could, their formal letter or email that they tried to submit to the board yesterday and had copied Mrs. Neff on. Is that, if I can hand that out?
If you just hand it to somebody at the end, we'll pass it down.
Briefly, Mrs. Neff has addressed some of the issues. What we'd like to stress, and I'm sure the board keeps it well in mind, as is set forth in the staff report, while a conditional use permit is permissible in this zoned area, the conditions are what are going to be dependent on whether the conditional use permit is a reasonable use in this area. And in the handout, which hopefully the members will have a chance to look at, we've gone through each of the 8 conditions, and certainly the suggestions or proposals made by Mrs. Neff tonight do not appear in those conditions, and we're suggesting first that the conditional use permit is not appropriate. It's not appropriate use for that property. It's not, it's a rural area, but it's basically a residential area. It's not like a Green Acres or something from long ago TV. And we've submitted that we think the board should impose specific conditions. And one of those conditions is that there should be a requirement that there be a contract entered into for the handling of the waste. Ms. Neff mentioned that she has an arrangement or has been talking with someone. We think this board should make that a condition if, in fact, the conditional use permit is going to be granted. We also think the number of dogs of 28 is excessive. The Bermans have suggested a more reasonable number, such as 20. And again, that relates to the noise issues and to the waste issues. We also had suggested, since the applicant has applied for temporary boarding, that there be some limitation on the maximum time period that any one particular dog could stay there. And we were suggesting maybe 28 days. We also requested that there always be at least one person present as long as any of the dogs are being kept in the kennel. We also asked that there be limitations. Right now, the condition is that the dogs could be outside. I think it's from like 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. I may have that incorrect. We also think, she suggested here that the dogs would only be out, not all together. We think there should be a limitation on the number of dogs that are outside at any one time. The Berman's residents, well, I appreciate
I assume that the Bermans have you under a payment schedule in respect of them and their hard-earned money. Can you finish pretty quickly?
Oh, yes, I can. I appreciate that. Well, like I say, it's fairly well summarized in the handout. The Bermans live on a ridge. Noise travels. The ridge, I think, is about equal elevation with where the proposed site of this kennel is going to be. And we think Mrs. Neff has proposed specific issues about the construction of the kennel facility, and we think specific construction requirements should be imposed as part of the conditions. And like I say, we think there should be a limitation on the number of dogs that are permitted outside, and that the dogs should not be permitted outside unsupervised, because history shows that the dogs, if they're with a human, typically tend not to bark as much. We also suggest that if in fact the conditional use permit is to be granted, it should not be transferable. It should be limited to the particular applicant, and then any transfer be made as part of an application for an amendment to the CUP. Again, we've detailed it more precisely in the handout. Thank you for the extra time, Chairman.
Anyone else who would like to speak either for or against, please come forward, give your name, magisterial district, and limit your comments to 3 minutes, please.
Hi. My name is Sheila Penner, and I'm attending this meeting tonight with my husband, Jack. We reside at 408 Laurel Grove Road, and we are totally opposed to the approval of the dog kennel. If you don't mind, I'd like to just read my notes. I didn't realize I was on TV before, and I want to get through all my items in the 3 minutes allotted to me. I recently addressed the Frederick County Planning Commission on the April 2nd session. I submitted those comments in writing to the Planning Commission for their perusal. First, I would like you to understand that the properties on Laurel Grove Road are all acreage, over 3 acres. There are only 14 homes on the first section of this road. Therefore, you will not see a large group of neighbors tonight because there's only 14 homes. However, one voice in protest should be enough for the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors to pause, examine, and ensure due diligence is spent on the concern of a citizen and a homeowner affected by this proposed venture. Our homes are surrounded by apple orchards and cornfields. This is an RA, Rural Agricultural Area. My husband and I built on our property in the orchard 42 years ago. And we have witnessed a lot of development out Middle Road and Laurel Grove Road as many seek a quiet country life. At the April 2nd Planning Commission meeting, Mr. Oates stated that homes in Frederick County in my area are not in a developed community. I'm well aware of this fact, as my neighbors and myself chose to build in this area in a beautiful and serene part of the county. He also, excuse me, I'm getting a little nervous. He also committed that it was rural area and we have pigs, goats, geese, and other animals that are a lot noisier than dogs. The tone of that comment and the meeting in general left me dejected, feeling that some of the members could have cared less about my concerns. If Mr. Oates or Mr. Unger had chosen to drive out our rural residential area, I think they would have known what I was talking about. I understand the Planning Commission acted based on what currently exists. I'm asking you to consider my concerns and those of my neighbors and ponder whether or not there needs to be a change. Take into consideration that development that I mentioned out Middle Road, the expensive homes near Jones Road, the homes across from Orchard View Elementary, they're all rated rural agricultural. I don't think they would look forward to having a kennel built next door to them. Mr. Unger stated at the Planning Commission that he visited an SPCA and he couldn't hear dogs barking. Well, if you're standing in traffic on Pleasant Valley Avenue and Featherbed Lane with all the businesses going on there, I don't think you are going to hear dogs barking. When I voiced concern over loss of property value, the county attorney, Mr. Williams, indicated the devaluation of property would be subjective. Well, if I ever wish to sell my property, I simply need to find the one buyer who wouldn't mind a kennel across the street from my home, the noise of barking dogs, and the non-residential traffic. It is more likely that I would find a buyer that does mind a business in the middle of the quiet country life and ask for a reduced rate on the property. Why should I lose money on my investment? The figures I have researched online are upwards of 20%, and the Clark County Commissioner of Revenue was quoted recently as guesstimating that the loss of property value next to a kennel would be anywhere from 15 to 20%. As most homes in the county are considered the primary asset of the homeowner, I'm sure other property owners would be greatly distressed when faced with the possibility that I face. I am sure that other property owners would take action like I am. I hope the board will look at the recent action of the Board of Supervisors of Clark County to deny any boarding kennels in Clark County based on some of the devaluation of land. And that should not be left to subjectivity. In looking over the application, I note that my residence was not included as a residence in front of the proposed kennel on the application. I hope the Planning Commission will verify this information. My property is in front of the Neff property and in view of the proposed location.
Ma'am, how much longer do you need?
Just a couple seconds.
Okay.
Right. Okay. I just want to ask a couple of questions that were not clear to me at the Planning Commission. Is this appropriate time? I don't see. Okay. On the, Ms. Neff talked at the Planning Commission meeting, and she said that she was converting a garage. On the application itself, she says she's got one or two buildings that she's going to build. I don't see where those are going to be located, or if it is a converted garage. That wasn't clear. Myself and my neighbors, we don't want to be a police force out there. Are we the ones responsible for making sure that she follows through on everything, on all these 8 requirements? I did want to address the removal of pet waste, but that's already been gotten into. She also states that they're the only ones living in the residence. There will be no employees to work this kennel. So I just don't understand how that could operate 24 hours a day with no help. She did address about the dogs. I want you to know that I've spoken to many of my neighbors. There are no dog haters among us. Many of us have dogs, but we do object to 28 barking dogs at one time. And if anyone has ever walked into a kennel, you know how dogs are when they're all together. And I would urge you to carefully review the 8 requirements of this conditional use permit while considering this is right for our neighborhood. The county's growing. Many homes are built in the county on RA land. The zoning as it exists will allow for businesses to be established among residential homes. A business is what this is. The sign will be posted saying it's a money-making operation. It will include incur increased traffic along our rural road. And I hope this is not just the beginning. Thank you for your time. Sorry.
Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Okay, that's what I thought.
My name's Rusty Clark. I'm Jessica's dad, and I just want to talk on behalf of Jessica. I think she went above and beyond what she needed to do to answer all the questions that the neighbors were concerned with, noise being one, barking dogs. As far as property values, I live in Frederick County also on Perry Road. I had a kennel go up about 25 years ago. It didn't affect my property value, and if it did, I wasn't planning on selling anyway. As far as where Jessica's putting the kennel, it's over a hill. Nobody's going to see it. Nobody's going to hear anything. And again, I think Jessica went above and beyond what she needed to do to answer all these questions and take care of all the issues because she's a very conscientious person, and that's the way she operates. So, thank you.
Anyone else?
Hi, I'm Beth Ann Berman, and I just want to say we have lived on Laurel Grove for 15 years. We have great neighbors. We have, the occasional dogs that are barking incessantly. We have some cows who end up on our property who've gotten free from, the farm. We have had some chickens, but we enjoy peace and quiet, and that's why we moved there. We enjoy a road that we can run on, and all of the problems that we face out in the country are easily solved with a phone call. And what our concern is that only one family in this room is going to benefit from this business being put on that property. And I also want to point out that where the Neff's home is, all of the property that goes down that ridge to my home, to my husband and our home, that is all owned by family members of the Neffs. So I want you to realize that if that were not the case, you would have a lot more opposition to this here tonight. You are concerned about quality of life. And for myself and my neighbors, we are concerned that our quality of life, what we know and love in our neighborhood and our community is going to change because someone wants to open a business that is going to have 28 dogs, no employees. It seems somewhat reckless to all of us. Thank you.
Anyone else? Please come forward.
Hello, I'm Chris McKenna. I live at 171 Laurel Grove Road, just down the block. And I'm not going to say anything new. I just want to add my name to the list of people who do have concerns with this proposal. Basically, three concerns I have. The difficult to quantify subject of home values. I know that nobody can put a number to it, but as a homeowner, we are concerned with it. The traffic on the road, as of right now, we just have I think somebody said 14 families on that road, and it's a quiet country road that we have an excellent quality of life on, and we're concerned that that may change with this proposal. And then just the fact that there is currently no other business on this road. This will be the first business on the road, and we're concerned that that may change the character of the area where we live. Thank you.
Come forward.
Hi, my name is Laura Culp. I live at 442 Laurel Grove Road, which is just about directly across from the Neffs. We do have a business along our road. It's the Virginia Tech Research Center. And it usually generates a good bit of traffic along our road, such as FedEx trucks, UPS, the dump truck, the regular, typical kind of noise. Also, as far as the noise of the dogs, we do have several other dogs barking out there. However, as the neighbors had said previously, We do live in apple orchards, cornfields. The research center has some tractors out there. So the dog barking would be, no louder than the typical pesticide sprayers that go through the apple orchards or the combines running through the cornfields. Thank you.
Anyone else who would like to speak?
Good afternoon, gentlemen. My name's Ray Hazlett. I live at 245 Laurel Grove Road. I'd like to run through just a couple of things from my perspective, if you will. Give me just a second here to and pull it up. First is I heard things about the acoustics and the engineering and stuff. Typically in that area, you go about things in a measurable and repeatable fashion. And with what was said, I didn't really hear where there was any engineering sciences necessarily applied. It might be in a building permit, I don't know. But since you're talking about acoustics, that's a lot different than talking about how to frame a house, let's say. And that seems to be one of the major concerns is the acoustics. So what subject matter expert has really looked at the construction to vouch for the acoustical properties? Putting in cement walls may actually enhance the acoustics. I don't know. I'm not a subject matter expert in acoustics. But I think that could be a consideration for one of the requirements is to have a review done of that the acoustical properties of the construction. Next, besides living in Frederick County for about 5 years now, I moved in from Stafford and bought the property there at 245. I had bought the property because we were looking for estate living, for country living, for a quiet place that. And the word quiet can be somewhat subjective. Yes, there's noise, but it's country noise. It's things that you would expect. The occasional tractor out in the fields, the cow mooing because the calf is being a little high maintenance that day. And yes, occasionally there's a dog barking here or there and all kinds of sounds, but it's not constant. It's a personal nature. And as it was said, if it was ever really bothersome, with a phone call, you can take care of it because it's a neighborly thing. There's not a corporate investment, not a self-investment of any type of monetary. We all enjoy neighborly living, and that's what makes this area, and it's a very beautiful area of the county, worth the investment, which actually for me, I consider to be quite substantial. If you run the housing prices out there, you're talking $500,000 or better. I believe actually the Neff house at some point was for sale and it was upwards of $1 million. So we're talking substantial investments by individuals that live there. Actually, in moving there, one of the first people I met, may I continue? Just a couple of minutes and I'll run through the list real quick then. One, also, I'm a small business owner in the county, so I know a little bit about what goes on with small business investment, entrepreneurism. I didn't really hear any substantiated skill or talent sets that concern not with being an entrepreneur, but when you're taking on a kennel, is there any certifications or training or background that you're taking on 28 canines? Cops are a pretty brave bunch and they're satisfied with just taking on their own canine for police duty. You're taking on 28 different personalities, if you will. And I haven't seen, and maybe that could be a requirement of, is there something substantial with regards to background training that you know what you're doing? You're not just going out and cutting grass. You're actually taking care of other people's beloved animals, as well as accepting responsibility for your neighbors around you. Another part is typically with these kennels, I have two animals, a cat and a dog. They're both rescue animals. I've had to put them in a kennel for going on vacation, everyone that I have visited up in this area has been in a light industrial commercial area. I've never gone to like a rural area per se. Those were the typical setups that I have seen since I've been up here, and I've had to use that type of service. So I would ask maybe that's a consideration too, is where the setup is, what would be standard and customary maybe. At least that be considered. With regards to the agricultural center, yes, there is some traffic, but I would have to beg to differ about the amount. Every time I've gone down there, the fence is always locked shut. Actually, I was curious as wondering what it was even. And it doesn't really generate any real traffic on our roadways. It's general neighbor traffic. In conclusion, not to overdo my time, I just want to bring up one of the people that I first met there, I believe was a relation to the Neffs. And the family actually was the original developer, the patriarch of the family was the original developer of the homes. Built a fine home. I'm tickled with our house. The neighbors' houses seem to be, it's a great setup. My point is that in the conversations and meeting, greeting and stuff, the whole intent was building an estate community, like we see in other places in the county. So yeah, you have fences, you have some horses, you see a few cows, but that's the general thing. It's not necessarily commercialized. And I think really the consideration of that is what might be the driving force, is the difference between country living and the regular noise versus the commercialization and the things that go with that. And where does it start and stop then? And I just ask for your considerations of those factors, and your time is greatly appreciated. I thank you.
Anyone else?
Good evening. My name is Christy McLaughlin. I promise you I will not take the 3 minutes. I am here on behalf of Jessica Neff. I am the treasurer of Shirley's Angels Boxer Rescue. We are a 501 nonprofit organization in Frederick County. We are foster-based. We don't have a shelter. We don't have a location. So when we pull dogs from high-kill shelters, they are put into foster homes where they are rehabilitated and then adopted out into loving homes. Jessica Neff has been a loyal and dedicated foster of my rescue and has shown remarkable responsibility. She has been very self-sacrificing with the dogs that she's taken on. I guarantee that she will be very, very dedicated to making sure that her property value is kept up. She's just been very loyal to us, and I'm sure that she's doing this more for the love of the animals than she is for any, profit-seeking venture. So, thank you.
Next.
My name's Carol Anderson. I'm representing Jarita Lloyd Bowers. She's deceased. Her daughter is my wife, Charlene. She has the estate now, her mother. We like it out there. We're trying to rent the house out, but our concern is the noise and the property value as everybody else. But thank you.
Anyone else?
Scott Berman, I'll just take a moment since Ed spoke on my behalf. So before I formed my opinion, I went out to a like-sized kennel that is actually built beyond what the Neffs are proposing as far as sound dampening. I drove around, I talked to neighbors. Every neighbor I talked to told me they were concerned about their property values dropping. One person said their house had been on the market. They were having a hard time selling it because of that. I even talked to the owners of the kennels who said, even with best intentions, it's noisy. Not only when the dogs are inside, you get 20 some odd dogs barking at once, which happens every time one other dog barks or a door opens. But again, I know they have good intentions. How do you keep dogs quiet when they're outside? Even if you have 20 some odd dogs and these have to be walked several times a day, you do the math, there's going to be several dogs out there. So again, before forming my opinion, I wanted to do a little research so I could speak in an educated fashion, and that's what I came up with. There is, unless there, and my neighbor brought up a good point, I've been to the Humane Society, which is poured concrete, and that sound does not seem to be as loud. But again, there's traffic noise. So, thank you for your time.
Anyone else? Last call. Seeing no one, we'll close the public hearing. Would the applicant like to address any issues that were heard? Okay. Any questions by board members? If not, I think this is Back Creek.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, I received some material last evening that I've read over, and hearing the remarks tonight, I have some more questions that added to the ones that I got from the material last night. I don't want to unnecessarily withhold a decision from the owner or from the property owners, but as Mrs. Penner said, I would like to do my due diligence, and there are questions that I have not gotten an answer to that unfortunately neither the applicant nor staff can answer. So with the board's indulgence, I would like to make a motion to postpone the decision on any action on this request until our May 14th meeting.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
I would second that.
Second by Supervisor Wells. Discussion. Perhaps during that time, could anything that was mentioned as a concern that the applicant is willing to memorialize in the conditions be undertaken?
Yes, I'll be happy to do that.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, do you know if it would be permissible for the applicant to receive the information that we got tonight with some of the written comments from one of the neighbors?
I think staff.
I don't know whether have you gotten a copy of that? Okay.
I provided the copy.
Okay, good. I just wanted to be sure that they had that they could respond to some of those questions that are coming up. I think that's fair, I think.
Other discussion?
Mr. Chairman,
Supervisor Collins.
since I won't be here for the May 14th meeting, I'll make my statement. I am concerned always with anything that happens in residential and rural areas when we build kennels or anything else that might provide pollution or noise pollution. I'm reminded of a case, however, of an individual who wanted to open a car wash. And neighborhoods came out and complained and said noise, traffic, crime rate was going to rise tremendously. And he was denied his permit to build a car wash. He then opened up a pig farm. Thank you.
Other discussion? We have a motion to postpone. Supervisor Wells.
Aye.
Supervisor Lofton.
Aye.
Supervisor DeHaven.
Aye.
Supervisor Fisher.
Aye.
Supervisor Collins.
Aye.
Supervisor Hess.
Aye.
Chairman votes aye, and the motion passes. Postponed till, what was that? May 14th. Next item is an ordinance amendment to the Frederick County Code, Chapter 165 zoning, Article 7 overlay districts. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. The revisions before you are to Part 702, which is the floodplain districts. Now, the current floodplain ordinance was revised back in 2009 as directed by the Department of Conservation and Recreation, which is the DCR. DCR has since modified the state model floodplain ordinance, and revisions to Part 702 are now necessary to meet the minimum regulatory standards required in a fully compliant floodplain ordinance. The primary revisions to the text that's before you tonight, there are new texts regarding the designation and duties of the floodplain administrator. There's new sections for jurisdictional boundary changes and submission of technical data, relocation and revisions to the description of special flood hazard districts, revisions to the factors to be considered when granting variances. There's some revisions to the elevation and construction standards, as well as new and revised definitions. Now, the DRC discussed this at their January 2014 meeting. They sent it forward to the Planning Commission. The Commission discussed this on March 5th. The Board of Supervisors discussed this on March 12th. The Planning Commission then held a public hearing for this at their April 2nd meeting. They did recommend approval of the ordinance. So tonight, staff is seeking a decision from the Board of Supervisors on this amendment. I would be glad to answer any questions you may have.
Point of clarification, this is as we last saw it without change?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman.
Supervisor Fisher.
I got some questions from constituents about it, and I'll just confirm what I'm pretty sure is true. When it mentions floodplain administrator, that's really not a new position. That will be an assigned, like to the zoning administrator, be part of a job description, but it's not a new
Correct. The
position.
zoning administrator has always been the floodplain administrator. This just puts it in text form.
Thank you.
Other questions?
I have just one for clarification, make sure it's on the record correctly. We did not cut this out of whole cloth. This was given to us and said, here's what you need to pass.
Correct.
From the state, correct?
Correct. DCR conducted an examination of our ordinance and found that it needed to be updated. Therefore, they provided us with a model ordinance that contained the minimum standards we have to have. We tailored it to Frederick County's needs, and that's what's before you.
Thank you.
Other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, this is a public hearing to consider an ordinance amendment to the Frederick County Code, Chapter 165 zoning, Article 7, overlay districts, Part 702, FP floodplain districts, revisions to the Frederick County zoning ordinance to bring Part 702 floodplain districts into compliance with the Virginia Department of Conservation and Recreation, DCR, and Virginia Model Floodplain Management Ordinance. Is there anyone here who would like to speak either for or against this ordinance amendment? If so, please come forward, give your name, magisterial district, and limit your comments to 3 minutes, please. Anyone? All right, seeing no one, we'll close the public hearing. It's a pleasure of the board.
Mr. Chairman, I move for approval of the ordinance amendment.
We have a motion by Supervisor Collins to approve. Is there a second?
Second, Mr. Chairman.
Second by Supervisor Fisher. Discussion.
Mr. Chairman?
Supervisor Fisher.
Just for clarification, I did talk with Ms. Perkins about issues that we have in the county where sometimes things get built across streams. And if there was anything in here that had any enforcement capabilities in it, that would reflect on people like Corps of Engineers, DEQ, Virginia Marine Commission, et cetera, since they tend to ignore these things after they're done. And she assured me there's nothing in here that provides any enforcement of any of that, which I found to be very interesting. But it's something I think we need to do, though, to comply with state code.
Would you like a staff response if they care to give one?
I talked to Ms. Perkins about this, and this is not covered, unfortunately.
Well, you have to wonder when you hear about the ones that were built that weren't supposed to be, are they required to be dismantled and taken down, or what happens? You do have to wonder a little bit. Was there an answer to that part of it?
If we were made aware of a structure that was built without any permits, we would have to go back, cite them. They would have to then go to the regulatory agencies and achieve approvals from them, and if modifications were necessary, they would have to do those. But it would be up to the floodplain administrator to initially cite them and bring them into compliance.
And it couldn't be, they'd have to take it down, restore, if possible? Have we had any of those?
Rich?
Did have one in the county, Mr. Chairman.
One time.
One time, to our knowledge, yes, sir.
One that we were made aware of.
Well, you hear about things that were done that weren't supposed to be, that it seemed like they're still there sometimes, and one has to wonder. So thank you, Mr. Fisher, for letting me butt in. Anybody else? All right, then I think we're ready to vote. Supervisor Wells?
Aye.
Supervisor Lofton?
Aye.
Supervisor Haven?
Aye.
Supervisor Fisher?
Aye.
Supervisor Collins?
Aye.
Supervisor Hess?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, and the motion passes. The floodplain district ordinance is approved as modified there. Next is a planning item, discussion of the master development plan requirements. Go ahead.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. Following up from your committee reports, this item before you is a discussion on the master development plan requirements as outlined in the business-friendly report. One of the recommendations from the business-friendly report was to eliminate the master development plan process, and that discussion was forwarded to the Development Review and Regulations Committee for further discussion. As stated earlier, the DRC did not agree that the master plan process should be eliminated. They felt that it was an important process for the Planning Commission, the board, the general public, as well as applicants. So the DRC did recommend one change, which was to allow an applicant to process a detailed site plan in lieu of a master plan. Now, that site plan, just for clarification, would still come before the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors. It would still follow the same track, but it would eliminate the actual master plan and a duplicate site plan. So the applicant would have an option to do that. So the Planning Commission discussed the ordinance at their April 2nd meeting. They agreed to the changes proposed by the DRC, and they sent it forward to the board for discussion. So tonight, we are seeking direction from the board as to whether this is ready to be sent forward to public hearing. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Questions? Myself, I'm searching here for a semi-related issue, and I don't seem to find it. It looked to me like master development plans were required to be approved by the Director of Planning and the County Administrator. That's the way it is, but waivers and everything were only the Director of Planning. I thought that a little odd. Is that the way it usually is?
That's the way that,
Always been. So you have to have both those approvals?
on a final master development plan, once it's been through the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors as an informational item, it's then signed off by the planning director and the county administrator. However, if a property meets all of the criteria outlined in the waiver section, the director of planning is permitted to give them a waiver, and they still have to do, then they just go to the site plan process.
So basically, I just learned something I didn't know, but then I quizzed myself. So the county administrator must sign off on an approved master development plan, but if the requirement for it is waived, he doesn't have to do anything. I thought that a little bit odd. If you see my point, it's a very minor point, but I was surprised to see that the county administrator had to sign off. But I can't find exactly where it was said, but that's what it does say. So in the land of planning and the way in which master development plans are held, that's normal?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Is it a point worth raising? I got you on the spot, I know.
It seems that the practice is acceptable.
Okay. Anybody else with questions or queries? Staff is looking for a recommendation from the board if this particular changes to the master development process are ready for public hearing.
Mr. Chairman, I'm assuming with this that the county ordinances are all accounted for through this process, even if it's a site plan versus the master development plan. So it's really a technicality that you're still going to have to comply with all the county ordinances. So it's just, I guess, a slight efficiency that might apply at certain times.
You get your answer?
Yes.
Anyone else?
I guess, Mr. Chairman, just a comment. For me, the great benefit of the MDP has always been the opportunity to further enhance the opportunities for the public to have insight into what's going on, possibly in their neighborhood, but any place in the county. It's more of a take note, something's being planned. I guess the other thing is that it helped to firm up what would happen when something happened. I have no issue with an option to request a waiver, and our processes should protect everyone involved with consideration of that request. And similarly with the site plan. I just think that one way or another, I think that benefit is preserved, just in a different way. So, just a comment.
Anyone else? I know I've always thought it very helpful to a board member to see what the ordinances we pass look like when they get put into action, besides going out after it's built. Anyway.
I think, Mr. Chairman, if I read this correctly, even if there is the waiver for a site plan, we're still going to get a chance to look at it just like we would if it was a master development plan. So it'll still come to the Planning Commission and the board as information. So if we still want to make comments, so it's still going to come to us.
Now, I think basically it was, that was the compromise versus removing the master development plan from coming before the board for information only. I think that was the discussion. Am I correct?
Correct, it was a
I don't want
compromise.
to get confused on what we were actually trying to look at here.
Right, because there's a difference. Sometimes you'll have smaller properties that they know exactly what they want to do, whereas you'll have a larger property that may be phased that want to be more general. So the larger developments could still be more general and come to you with a regular master plan, but then a smaller property that they already know what they want to do, they can go ahead and engineer it and submit it through the process. So the board would still see it as an informational item either way.
I guess the nature of what I was trying to express was I was glad that other people saw benefit to us be able to look at the master development plans. And so therefore, they did not remove the requirement that it be brought before us, except for those cases where there was waivers, you pick it up in site plan. I didn't mean to imply anything else. And I think that's the same, close to the same thing that Supervisor DeHaven was talking about, but he was talking about a broader audience. Anyone else? Is it ready?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'll move we send it to public hearing.
All right, we have a motion to send to public hearing. Is there a second?
Second, Mr. Chairman.
Second by Supervisor DeHaven. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. The board liaison reports, are there any?
Mr. Chairman, yes. I would like to thank Mr. Riley and the board for considering the addition of the resolution honoring the centennial of the Smith-Lever Act. As you know now, and I know now, that this was actually the act in 1914 that established the Cooperative Extension Service. And I thought it was important that we do this because I think it's, again, important that we recognize that the Extension Service is more than just about helping farmers out with livestock and with orchards, with things like that. But if you look at the other things that the Extension Service does, such as nutrition, health, youth development, animal husbandry, small business, and personal finance, as we heard in our work session with the Extension Service several months ago, there's a variety of things that they do, and I just felt it was important that we recognize the fact that this is a milestone for them, 100-year celebration, and they're still going strong, and I think everyone in the Extension Service does a great job, and thank you for allowing me to do this tonight.
Any other liaison reports? Citizen comments. This is the portion of the meeting the board sets aside to hear comments from the citizens. Or is there anyone here who would like to address the board on any topic? If so, would you please come forward, give your name, magisterial district, limit your comments 3 minutes, please. Anyone? All right, we'll close the citizen comment portion of the meeting. Board of Supervisors comments.
Mr. Chairman, if I might update you on the stormwater program. Met with staff today, public works staff. I know we've been talking about getting this coming to the board for quite some time. Well, there was another change passed back in March. Staff is revising the stormwater ordinance that we must have in place by July 1. Currently, the plans are that it should be submitted by May 7th in that area, and that we should get it at the board meeting on the 23rd, the second meeting in May. And hopefully this will get delivered to the members 2 or 3 weeks ahead of time, so you'll have time to read all the interesting information. But it's still an evolving process. Just in case you wonder where this thing got lost, it's not lost. It's just being constantly modified, and so it will be coming.
Any change in the deadlines inflicted upon us? It's hard to hit a moving target.
At this time, no. I can give you an opinion that I have picked up that a number of counties, municipalities are choosing not to participate they will be having DEQ do the enforcement and the permitting. My question I have in the back of my mind, and there's a number of local counties I found out that are going to let DEQ run the show. I'd like to see how DEQ is going to be able to staff to do this thing come July 1st. So it looks like it's going to who knows what's going to happen, but that's just my opinion from what I see going on, how they're going to be staffed to handle it.
Well, isn't there some fear about how we'll staff it and run it?
No, sir.
No, sir. They're currently, our staff is saying they will be able to run it. It's also taking.
It was a tremendous burden being placed upon them.
Well, it is, but they've stepped up to the plate and they're going to do it. And I'd much rather have them do it than have a builder out here.
I didn't dispute that. I just wondered when payday came and what we had to do in order to.
Well, it's also incorporating the E&S program that we currently have in place will be pulled in and adopted into this, as well as the broader stormwater program. So it's still coming.
It's not a criticism of staff, Mr. Riley.
No, I just don't want DEQ running our program and people having to wait a year to get a permit.
Okay. Question to Mr. Fisher on an important topic.
I just like to say along with Mr. Fisher that we're blessed with the staff that we have that's been working on this. It's been a real struggle. They've done a great job. I think Frederick County is way ahead of the other counties in the area because of our staff and the level of commitment that they've made to this program. And I feel the same way. I would much rather have this program handled internally by us than to have it by DEQ on the outside.
Question, Mr. Fisher. Has DEQ decreased the amount of money they get from the permits that we issue?
Actually, on the one Mr. Wilder told me about, they actually reduced one on the residential. So it's a constantly moving target, and Mr. Wells' comments should be very well taken. Our staff has, this ballgame has just continued to change, and they just keep going with it. They go with the flow. They just keep modifying it to keep up with what changes are being thrown at them. And I think we're going to be on schedule to have a draft stormwater program in place to meet the demands of the state. Life will change in the development and building community, I will tell you that.
It will.
Big time.
Other comments on the storm?
Just one, Mr. Chairman, and it's not a negative in any way, shape, or form, but I don't think anyone's in a better position to make sure that our citizens are best served than the locality. Pleased that we've stepped up and taken this step.
Anyone else? I have one topic. I have a little problem. Hopefully it has a simple solution. I had a mental lapse as we adopted the minutes. Advised Mr. Tibbs of a false recording on a vote I made and then forgot to bring it up. I suppose under Robert's rules, had I looked, we could rescind and reapprove, but I fear that if I don't say something, then the minutes will not be recorded correctly, so I'm caught here. I want the easiest way out. So, Mr. Williams, can you advise how I can handle this? It's one vote on one thing in the minutes.
Either a motion to reconsider, I think the entire board voted the affirmative, so any member could make the motion to reconsider, to reopen it, to make the correction. And then once that motion passes, it's a motion to amend it.
I did vote no. I'd like the minutes to reflect what actually happened, and so I solicit the help of the board to overcome my failure to be awake when we went through it. I guess I had a mental lapse. So your assistance is.
Move to reconsider.
We have a motion to reconsider. Is there a second?
Second.
All right. All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Those no? Now, the topic of the minutes for the regular meeting, April 9th, 2014, is before you. I would ask you to correct the vote on the pump and haul, my no vote.
Mr. Chairman, I would
Before
so
you as
move.
amended.
So move.
We have a motion to approve as amended. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Fisher. Discussion? And all those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Mr. Williams, did we cover all the bases there?
That's,
I appreciate the board's indulgence. Any other comments by board members?
Move for adjournment.
We have a motion to adjourn by Supervisor DeHaven. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Supervisor Fisher. All those in favor, aye? Aye. Opposed, no. Meeting adjourned.